My presence would embarrass him and his wife? "Dad, you're just a mechanic with dirty hands," he told me over the phone. I hung up, stared at my grease-stained fingers, and thought that was the end of it. But 3 days later, they called begging me to come help. And when I showed up with my toolbox, a man stepped out of a $300,000 Bentley and said something that changed everything. Before I tell you what that man said, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching this from. I love connecting with people from all over the world who understand what it's like to be underestimated. The wrench slipped from my oil-slicked fingers as the phone's shrill ring cut through the rumble of the Chevy's engine. I'd been elbow deep in a transmission rebuild for the better part of 3 hours, and the last thing I needed was an interruption. But when I saw Austin's name flashing on the screen, I wiped my hands on an old shop rag and answered, "Hey, son, what's up?" The silence stretched longer than it should have. I could hear Riley's voice in the background, sharp and insistent, though I couldn't make out the words. "Dad, we need to talk about Thursday Thanksgiving." The dinner I'd been looking forward to for weeks. Riley had insisted on hosting this year at their new place in Brookfield Heights, the kind of neighborhood where the mailboxes cost more than most people's monthly rent. "Sure thing. What time should I be there? I can bring my famous stuffing." Or maybe actually, "Dad, that's what I'm calling about." Austin's voice had that careful tone he used when he was about to deliver bad news. The same tone he'd used when he told me he was switching majors from mechanical engineering to computer science. "We've decided it might be better if you didn't come this year." The garage suddenly felt colder. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across the concrete floor, scattered with tools and parts. I set down the rag, my fingers still black with grease despite the wiping. "Come again?" "Look, Dad. Riley's got some important people coming. Colleagues from her venture capital firm, potential investors. It's a big opportunity for both of us." He paused, and I could almost see him running his hand through his hair, the way he'd done as a kid when he was nervous. "The thing is, you're a mechanic, Dad. You've got grease under your fingernails. You smell like motor oil, and honestly, you'd embarrass us." The words hit me like a sucker punch to the gut. I'd raised this boy alone since he was 7 years old, after his mother decided being a mechanic's wife wasn't glamorous enough for her Instagram lifestyle. I'd worked double shifts to pay for his private school, sold my classic Mustang to cover his college tuition, and missed countless evenings with friends to help him with homework I barely understood. "Austin, I've been working with my hands for 40 years. These hands put food on your tablecloth on your back and paid for that fancy degree hanging on your wall. I know, Dad, and I'm grateful, but this is different. This is about our future. Riley's uncle might invest in our startup, but only if everything looks professional." Professional. As if 37 years of honest work of building engines that purr like kittens and fixing problems other mechanics couldn't solve wasn't professional enough. I thought about the photo on my workbench, Austin at his graduation, grinning in his cap and gown, while I stood beside him in my one good suit, the one I'd bought specifically for that day. He'd hugged me, then told me he couldn't have done it without me. That seemed like a lifetime ago. "So what you're saying is I'm good enough to fix your car when it breaks down, but not good enough to sit at your dinner table. Dad, don't make this harder than it has to be. It's just one Thanksgiving. We can do something together another time. Just the family. Just the family." As if Riley's venture capitalist friends were more family than the man who'd sacrificed everything to raise him. "Fine." The word came out rougher than I intended. "You do what you think is best." "Dad," I hung up before he could finish. The garage fell silent except for the tick of cooling metal and the distant hum of traffic on Route 9. I stood there for a long moment staring at my hands, these weathered, capable hands that had built and fixed and created for 4 decades. The same hands that had changed Austin's diapers, taught him to ride a bike, and applauded at every little league game. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just an embarrassment, a relic from a world where hard work and honest sweat still meant something. I thought that was the end of it. I thought I'd spend Thanksgiving alone. Maybe watch some football. Maybe not. But 3 days later, my phone rang again. Friday morning, 7:00 a.m. sharp, and my phone was screaming from the nightstand. I'd been up until 2 nursing a beer and trying to forget Austin's rejection. Now I was fumbling for the damn thing in my boxers and yesterday's t-shirt. Dad. Austin's voice crackled through high-pitched and frantic. Dad, we've got a serious problem. I rubbed my eyes squinting at weak November sunlight through my kitchen blinds. What's wrong? The BMW, it's completely dead. Won't start, won't turn over nothing. Riley's got 3 major client meetings today, and I've got that investor presentation at noon. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 days ago, I wasn't good enough for their dinner table. Now they needed me. Did you try jumping it? Dad, I'm not an idiot. We tried everything. Called AOA. They towed it to the BMW dealership. His voice cracked like he was 16 again. They want $3,000. $3,000 for some computer thing and transmission work. I poured yesterday's coffee, black and bitter as my mood. That's rough, son. Dad, we don't have that kind of money right now. Not with the startup costs and the house payment. Desperation bled through the phone. Riley's freaking out. She's got that big Hartwell Industries presentation, and if she misses it, maybe you should call a real mechanic. I said, letting the words hang. The silence stretched so long I thought the call had dropped. Dad, please. I know things are weird between us, but you're the only person who can fix this. You've always been able to fix everything. His voice dropped to a whisper. We can't afford a real mechanic right now. A real mechanic. As if I was some amateur playing with toys. I thought about hanging up. Thought about telling him to figure it out himself, the way I'd figured out how to raise a kid alone. Pay bills when work was slow, swallow my pride when life got hard. But this was Austin, my boy, the kid I taught to change oil at 12, who used to hand me wrenches and ask a million questions about engines, before college taught him his old man's knowledge wasn't worth much. What's wrong with it? Relief flooded his voice. The dealer said something about the transmission control module and fuel pump. Technical terms I didn't understand. Technical terms he didn't understand. The same kid who used to recite engine specs like baseball statistics. All right, I'll be there in an hour. Dad, thank you. I mean it. You're saving our lives here. Saving their lives with the same hands that would have embarrassed them at dinner. I hung up and grabbed my coffee keys and the toolbox that had been my constant companion for 4 decades. The same toolbox Austin used to dig through as a kid, fascinated by every socket and wrench. The irony tasted worse than stale coffee. So there I was driving my beat-up pickup toward their fancy neighborhood, wondering how the hands that were too dirty for Thanksgiving dinner were suddenly clean enough to save their expensive car. Brookfield Heights hit me like a slap with a silk glove. Every lawn looked like a golf course, every driveway a car showroom. My '98 Ford pickup coughed past houses that cost more than I'd made in a decade, drawing stares from joggers in designer athletic wear. Austin and Riley's place sat at the end of Maple Ridge Court, like something from a magazine, fake columns, oversized windows, the kind of house that screamed money. I pulled into their circular driveway, my truck looking like a stray dog at a dog show. Through the bay window next door, Mrs. Vivian Thornton peered through her blinds. I'd bet she was already calling the homeowners association about the eyesore in her perfect neighborhood. Austin emerged before I'd cut the engine, dressed in khakis and polo like he was heading to the country club. Riley appeared behind him, blonde hair pulled back in that effortless way that probably took an hour checking her Apple Watch constantly. Dad, thank God you're here. Austin's smile looked painted on. The car's in the garage. Riley managed a tight nod. Mr. Foster, thank you for coming. Mr. Foster, like I was hired help instead of the man who'd raised her husband. The garage was bigger than my house, with space for 4 cars and a workshop that had never seen real work. The BMW sat like a wounded animal hood already open. I grabbed my toolbox, ignoring how Riley stepped back like grease might be contagious. What exactly happened? It just died, Austin said, hovering behind me. Yesterday afternoon, Riley was leaving for work, and it just stopped. I leaned over the engine bay, running my hands along wiring harnesses, checking connections. Beautiful machine, all German engineering. But beauty meant nothing when the computer brain took a vacation. Could be the transmission control module, I muttered. Or the fuel pump relay. Maybe both. I traced electrical connections, feeling for loose wires, checking for corrosion. Riley shifted nervously. How long will it take? I straightened up, wiping my hands on my shop rag. This isn't a 15-minute fix. Computer diagnostics possibly pulling the transmission pan. Maybe dropping the fuel tank. 6-7 hours minimum. Austin's face went white. 6 hours. Dad, Riley's presentation is at 2. Then you better hope it's just a relay. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was in their spotless garage that had never seen real work, using skills they'd called embarrassing to save their upscale lifestyle. The same hands too dirty for their dinner table were now their only salvation. I was so focused on tracing the fuel line that I barely heard the car door slam. But when I looked up from under that hood, I saw a man in a $1,000 suit walking toward us, and Austin's face went white as a sheet. The Bentley's door closed with a kind of solid thunk that only comes from German engineering and a 6F figurer price tag. The man who stepped out looked like he'd walked off the cover of Forbes' silver hair, perfectly styled charcoal suit that probably cost more than my truck, and the kind of confident stride that said he owned whatever room he entered. Austin practically jogged over to meet him, his earlier panic replaced by the desperate enthusiasm of a salesman who just spotted his biggest prospect. Uncle Benjamin, what a surprise. We weren't expecting you until next week. Uncle Benjamin, Riley's uncle, the one Austin had mentioned during that phone call 3 days ago, the potential investor who might fund their startup dreams. Benjamin, darling. Riley appeared at Austin's side, her earlier stress evaporating into a practice smile. I thought you were still in Chicago, wrapped up early. Benjamin Ashworth's voice carried the kind of authority that came from decades of making million-dollar decisions. Thought I'd stop by to see how my favorite niece was settling into married life. His eyes swept over the scene, the pristine garage, the disabled BMW, and me still bent over the engine bay, with grease on my hands and tools scattered around my feet. Car trouble? He asked, raising an eyebrow. Riley laughed, a sound as artificial as the sweetener in diet soda. Oh, just a little hiccup. We called our handyman to take a look. Handyman. 3 days ago, I was too embarrassing to share their dinner table. Now I was their handyman. Austin jumped in, clearly eager to steer the conversation away from their automotive emergency. Uncle Benjamin, you should see the business plan. We've been working on the market projections alone. In a moment, Benjamin held up a hand, his attention fixed on me. Mind if I take a look? Before Austin could object, Benjamin walked over to where I was working. He moved with the careful precision of someone who knew his way around expensive machinery, stopping just close enough to observe without getting in the way. I continued my diagnosis, checking the fuel pressure regulator, testing electrical connections. Most people would see a guy in coveralls and assume I was just throwing parts at the problem until something stuck. But Benjamin Ashworth wasn't most people. Transmission control module, he asked, watching me trace the wiring harness. I glanced up, surprised. Could be. Or the fuel pump relay. Won't know for sure until I run a full diagnostic. What's your gut telling you? I paused, studying his face. This wasn't small talk. He genuinely wanted to know. Fuel pumps running, so probably not that. My money is on the TCM or a bad connection in the valve body wiring. Benjamin nodded slowly, his eyes following my methodical approach to the problem, while Austin and Riley stood frozen by the garage entrance, probably wondering why their potential investor was more interested in their broken car than their business proposal. Benjamin crouched down beside me. You've worked on these before a few times. German engineering's solid, but when the computers go bad, it gets expensive fast. Indeed, it does. He watched as I carefully removed the transmission pan, noting how I organized each bolt, how I handled the delicate electronic components. Most shops would have already started throwing parts at this. Most shops get paid by the hour. I said, not looking up for my work, I prefer to fix it right the first time. Something shifted in Benjamin's expression, a spark of recognition, like he'd just solved a puzzle he'd been working on for years. Most people see a guy in dirty coveralls and assume he's just another grease monkey. But Benjamin Ashworth wasn't most people. He knew quality when he saw it, and something about my technique made him step closer. Benjamin rolled up his sleeves, actual Italian silk sleeves, and leaned in closer to examine my work. You've got a systematic approach, he observed, watching me methodically test each connection. Most mechanics I know would have started swapping parts by now. Waste of time and money? I said, carefully probing the transmission control module's wiring. These German cars talk to you if you know how to listen. Interesting philosophy. He studied the way I handled the delicate electronic components, how I traced each wire with the patience of a surgeon. You do restoration work. I glanced up from the engine bay. Used to not much call for it these days. What kind of cars? Classics? Mostly muscle cars from the 60s and 70s? Some European stuff. I went back to my diagnostic, but Benjamin wasn't done with his questions. Ever work on a Shelby Cobra? My hand stilled on the wiring harness. Once, long time ago, Benjamin's voice took on a different quality, like he was describing a religious experience. I own a 1965 Cobra, most perfect restoration I've ever seen. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, every detail authentic, every component rebuilt to factory specifications, but somehow better than original. I kept my eyes on the engine, but I could feel my pulse quickening. Sounds like a beautiful car. It is. Cost me $2.5 million at auction, but it was worth every penny. The work was so precise, so artistic. I've been trying to find the craftsman who restored it for years. Want to commission him for my entire collection. The garage fell quiet except for the soft hum of the Bentley's cooling engine. Austin and Riley exchanged nervous glances, probably wondering why their potential investor was more interested in old cars than their startup pitch. What color was it? I asked quietly. Benjamin's eyes sharpened. Guardsman blue with white racing stripes. Original 427 side oiler, completely rebuilt, even had the correct date codes on the spark plug wires. I straightened up slowly, wiping my hands on the shop rag. Shelby American serial number CSX unit. The color drained from Benjamin's face. How could you possibly know that? Because I spent 8 months of my life bringing that car back from the dead. Found it in a barn in Wisconsin. More rust than metal. Had to fabricate half the body panels by hand. Benjamin stared at me like he'd just seen a ghost walk through the garage door. That's impossible. You're Joe Foster. Used to run Foster's Classic Restoration on Industrial Boulevard. I managed a small smile. Sold the shop 5 years ago to pay for my son's college tuition. My God. Benjamin's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. You're him. You're the master who restored my Cobra. His eyes went wide as the full impact hit him. I paid $2.5 million for that car because of your work. Austin's jaw dropped so far, I thought it might hit the concrete floor. Riley's perfectly composed expression cracked like ice in warm water, her face cycling through confusion shock, and something that might have been panic. Benjamin looked back and forth between me and them pieces of a puzzle clicking into place in his mind. Wait a minute. You're related to these two. The silence that followed was deafening. Austin and Riley stood there like deer in headlights, probably wondering how their embarrassing mechanic had just become worth $2.5 million. But Benjamin wasn't done with his questions. Benjamin shook his head in amazement. Foster's classic restoration. You had quite a reputation among collectors. He glanced around the garage. So what brings the legendary Joe Foster to fix BMWs in suburban driveways? I felt Austin and Riley's panic radiating heat, just helping out family. Family Benjamin's expression softened. Nothing more important, especially during holidays. He looked directly at me with genuine curiosity. Say, Joe, I didn't see you at Thanksgiving dinner here. If Austin's your son, surely you must have been there. The garage went dead silent. Austin cleared his throat nervously. Riley suddenly found her phone fascinating. Actually, I spent it at home. Watched some football. Benjamin's brow furrowed deeply. At home. But that doesn't make sense. He looked between Austin and Riley, confusion growing. Why wouldn't you invite your own father? Austin jumped in, voice pitched unnaturally high. Well, we had a very specific guest list. Business associates, you know how it is? Business associates, Benjamin repeated slowly, his tone sharpening. More important than family. The silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. Riley's face went pale beneath her makeup. Austin looked like he wanted to disappear into the concrete. There was a situation. Riley managed weakly. What kind of situation? Benjamin's voice carried the authority of a man accustomed to getting straight answers. I could have let them squirm, watch them try to spin their way out but I was tired of the games, tired of pretending their rejection hadn't cut deep. They didn't want me there, I said simply. Thought I'd embarrass them in front of Riley's colleagues. Benjamin went very still. I'm sorry. What did you just say? Austin's face flushed red. Dad, that's exactly how it was. I met his eyes steadily. Your exact words were that I was just a mechanic with dirty hands and I'd make you look bad. Benjamin's expression shifted from confusion to something much darker. Let me understand this correctly. His voice dropped to a dangerous quiet. You excluded your own father, a master craftsman, whose work I treasure above almost any possession, from your family dinner because you were embarrassed by him. Uncle Benjamin, you don't understand the full situation. Riley started desperately. Oh, I understand perfectly. Benjamin's composure cracked like ice under pressure. You thought Joe Foster, the man whose artistry created a $2.5 million masterpiece, wasn't good enough for your dinner table. The weight of their hypocrisy hung in the air like smoke. Benjamin looked at them with the kind of disappointment usually reserved for children who'd broken something precious and irreplaceable. I'd seen a lot of things in my 62 years, but I'd never seen a man's face change the way Benjamin Ashworth's did in that moment. The disappointment in his eyes wasn't directed at me. Benjamin's anger erupted like a dam bursting. Do you have any idea what you've done? His voice carried across the garage with the force of a man who'd built an empire unrecognizing value. Any idea at all? Austin and Riley stood frozen, probably realizing their carefully constructed world was crumbling around them. Joe Foster isn't just some mechanic you call when your expensive toy breaks down. Benjamin's words cut through the air like a blade. He's an artist, a master craftsman, whose work belongs in museums. That Cobra restoration. It's not just a car, it's a masterpiece. Through the bay window, I caught sight of Mrs. Vivian Thornton pressed against her glass, probably getting the show of her lifetime for the neighborhood gossip network. Uncle Benjamin, please. You're making this bigger than it needs to be. Riley cried desperately. Bigger than it needs to be. Benjamin whirled on her. Your husband excluded a man whose single piece of work is worth more than your house, your cars, and your precious startup combined. Because he was embarrassed by honest work. Austin's face went white as fresh paint. We didn't know. You didn't know because you never bothered to ask. Benjamin's voice rose to a roar. You looked at your father's hands and saw dirt instead of artistry. You saw shame instead of skill that takes decades to master. The garage fell silent except for the distant hum of traffic and Mrs. Thornton's air conditioning unit kicking on. Benjamin pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with decisive precision. Riley, I'm withdrawing my investment offer, effective immediately. Riley's knees nearly buckled. Uncle Benjamin, no. Please, we can explain. Explain that you're too shallow to recognize talent when it's sitting at your own dinner table. He didn't even look up from his phone. I don't invest in people who lack basic judgment. Austin stepped forward, desperation bleeding through his voice. Sir, with all due respect, this is a family matter. It shouldn't affect business. Everything affects business, son. Character, most of all. Benjamin finished whatever he was typing and looked up. I've spent 40 years building my company on one principle. Surround yourself with the best people you can find. People who understand quality, who respect craftsmanship, who know the difference between surface shine and real substance. He gestured toward me. Joe Foster represents everything I value in a business partner. Precision, dedication, integrity. You represent everything. I avoid people who judge worth by appearances instead of results. The silence stretched like a taut wire. Austin looked like he might be sick. Riley's perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. Benjamin turned to me, his expression softening. Joe, I'd like to offer you an exclusive restoration contract. My entire collection, 12 classic cars, with more acquisitions planned, $500,000 annually, plus materials and bonuses for exceptional work. Austin's jaw dropped so hard I thought it might hit the concrete. $500,000 more than his startup had projected in revenue for their first 3 years? I don't invest in people who can't recognize the treasure in their own family. Benjamin said, his words carrying the weight of final judgment. But Benjamin wasn't finished. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen in years. Respect, and said words that would change everything I thought I knew about my past. Benjamin reached into his jacket and pulled out a thick manila envelope, the kind lawyers use for important documents. Before you answer, Joe, there's something else you need to know. Austin and Riley watched in stunned silence as Benjamin opened the envelope and spread several papers across the BMW's hood. 3 years ago, I started searching for the craftsman who restored my Cobra. I hired private investigators, contacted auction houses, tracked down every lead. Benjamin's voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. The trail led me to Industrial Boulevard to a shop called Foster's Classic Restoration. My heart stopped. That was my place. I know. Benjamin pulled out a photograph. My old shop, the sign I'd painted myself hanging over the bay doors. By the time I found it, the new owner told me the previous proprietor had sold out, needed money for his son's education. The garage went deadly quiet. Austin's face drained of all color as the implications hit him. I bought it back, Joe. Benjamin's words fell like stones into still water. Paid 3 times what it was worth, but I didn't care. I've been looking for you for 3 years. I stared at the photograph, memories flooding back. The early mornings, the late nights, the satisfaction of bringing dead metal back to life. The day I signed those papers, watching everything I'd built disappear so Austin could have his computer science degree. You own my old shop. We do. Benjamin smiled, pulling out another document. I had the lawyers draw partnership papers. 50-50 ownership, Foster and Ashworth Classic Restoration. He paused, his voice softening. I figured you might want your name back on the door. Austin made a sound like he'd been punched in the gut. Dad, you never told me. You never asked. The words came out harder than I intended. You were too busy being embarrassed by what I did to care about what it cost me. Riley's voice was barely a whisper. You sold your business for Austin's college. Every bolt, every tool, every dream I had. I looked at my son, seeing him clearly for maybe the first time in years. I wanted you to have opportunities I never had. Figured a degree was worth more than an old man's garage. Benjamin spread out blueprints on the hood. The shop's been sitting empty since I bought it, waiting for the right partner. He looked at me with something approaching reverence. I don't want to hire you, Joe. I want to work with you. Build something together. Austin stepped forward, his voice breaking. Dad, I had no idea. I never knew you sacrificed. You weren't supposed to know. I picked up the partnership papers, my hands trembling slightly. I wanted you to make your own way, not feel guilty about mine. Benjamin watched the exchange with the patience of a man who understood the weight of family dynamics. The offer stands, Joe. Your garage, your name on the door, your rules. I just want to learn from the best. I looked at the papers, at the photograph of my old shop, at my son's stricken face. For 3 years, I'd told myself selling the garage was worth it if Austin succeeded. Now I realize success meant more than just money or status. Partnership, I said, finally, not employment. Benjamin's smile could have powered the neighborhood. Partnership. 6 months later, I stood in the same garage where this story began, but everything had changed. The sign outside no longer read Foster's Classic Restoration. It read, Foster and Ashworth Master Craftsman. The transformation was remarkable. High-end clients drove from 3 states away to have their classics restored at Foster and Ashworth. Ferraris, Porsches, vintage Mustangs, cars, worth more than most people's houses, filled our bays. Benjamin and I worked side by side, 2 craftsmen who understood that perfection wasn't just a goal, it was a standard. My hands, once deemed too dirty for family dinners, now commanded respect from collectors who paid premium prices for our artistry. The same fingers that Austin had called embarrassing were featured in Classic Car Magazine's cover story, The Masters Behind Million-Dollar Restorations. Austin and Riley's startup had collapsed within months of losing Benjamin's backing. Without the investment, they couldn't maintain their lifestyle. The McMansion went up for sale, replaced by a modest apartment in a neighborhood where my pickup truck wouldn't stand out. Austin took a job at a tech company, swallowing his entrepreneurial pride for a steady paycheck. They came by the shop on a Tuesday afternoon in March, both of them looking humbled by circumstances I wouldn't have wished on anyone, even after everything that had happened. Dad, Austin said, standing awkwardly by the entrance while I worked on a 1967 Camaro SS, we were hoping we could talk. I didn't stop working, but I listened. We know we messed up. Riley added, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. We were wrong about everything. I straightened up, wiping my hands on a shop rag, a gesture that once made them cringe. What do you want, Austin? We want our family back, he said simply. We want to make things right. I studied my son's face, seeing something there I hadn't noticed in years. Genuine remorse mixed with hard-earned wisdom. You can start by understanding something I said. This isn't about forgiveness. This is about respect. You don't get to treat people like garbage and then expect them to welcome you back when it's convenient. Austin nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears. I know. I understand that now. What you did for me, selling the shop for my education, I never knew. I never appreciated it. You never asked, I said, but without the anger that used to accompany those words. I'm asking now, he said. I'm asking about everything. Your work, your sacrifices, your dreams. I want to learn who my father really is, not who I thought he should be. Benjamin emerged from the office, nodding politely at Austin and Riley before giving me a questioning look. I gave him a small nod. Everything was fine. Here's how this works, I told Austin. You want a relationship with me, you earn it. You show up, you listen, you respect what I do and who I am. No conditions, no embarrassment, no apologies for my profession. Yes, sir, Austin said, and for the first time in years, he sounded like the boy I'd raised. Riley stepped forward. Mr. Foster Joe, I owe you an apology. We both do. We were wrong to judge you wrong, to exclude you wrong about everything that matters. I looked at them both. These two people who'd caused me so much pain, and realized something had shifted. Not forgiveness, that would take time, but possibility. The possibility that family could be rebuilt on better foundations. We'll see, I said. Actions matter more than words. As they left, I returned to the Camaro, my hands steady and sure. Sometimes the people who call you embarrassing are just embarrassed by their own inability to see your worth. Don't let anyone dim your light, especially family who should be holding the torch. Looking back at my story now, I realize how close I came to losing everything that truly mattered. For years, I let other people's opinions define my worth, even when those people were my own family. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't wait for others to validate what God has already placed in your hands. The truth is, we all have gifts that the world needs. Mine happen to be working with engines, but yours might be teaching, cooking, writing, or simply listening to people who need to be heard. Whatever it is, don't let anyone convince you it's not valuable enough. God doesn't make mistakes when He distributes talents, and He certainly didn't make one with you. This true story taught me that respect isn't something you beg for. It's something you command through excellence and integrity. When Benjamin recognized my work, it wasn't because I changed who I was. It was because I never stopped being excellent at what God called me to do, even when my own son couldn't see it. These grandpa stories we tell aren't just entertainment. They're warnings and wisdom wrapped in real experiences. My true story could have ended with me bitter and alone, watching football every Thanksgiving for the rest of my life. Instead, it became a testament to the power of staying true to your craft and your character. The biggest lesson: sometimes the people closest to you will be the last to recognize your worth. That's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their vision. Don't shrink yourself to fit into someone else's narrow definition of success. I spent decades being the family's reliable fix-it man, never asking for recognition. But there's a difference between being useful and being valued. Learn that difference before it costs you what it almost costs me. Like all meaningful grandpa stories, this one carries a simple truth. Your worth isn't determined by other people's ability to see it. These grandpa stories remind us that it's never too late to reclaim what's rightfully ours, to set boundaries, and to demand the respect we've always deserved. If this true story touched something in your heart, I'd love to hear about a time when someone underestimated you. Drop a comment below and share your own experience. Don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us all of our inherent worth. My daughter returned after 3 years studying abroad and found me sitting in complete darkness. Dad, why is there no food anywhere? Your pension is $3,800 a month? Suddenly, my daughter-in-law appeared with a smug smile and coldly declared, I decide how every penny gets spent. My daughter slowly removed her earrings and did something that left everyone speechless. But what I'm about to tell you, what really happened in this house, is far more twisted than anyone could imagine. Before I reveal what happened next in that cold, dark house, please comment below and tell me where you're tuning in from today. My name is Holden Sinclair. I'm 72 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. My wife passed away 5 years ago, leaving me with 2 children, S.A., who went to study abroad in Europe 3 years ago, and Tristan, who married Arabella 2 years back. I receive a monthly pension of $3,800 from my 30 years of work, and during S.A.'s absence, Tristan and Arabella had been taking care of me. I wasn't expecting her that Tuesday afternoon in February. The doorbell rang twice, sharp and insistent, cutting through the silence of my cold house. I pulled the thin blanket tighter around my shoulders as I shuffled to the front door, my slippers barely making a sound on the hardwood floor. Dad. Chella's voice cracked as she took in my appearance. I watched her eyes widen, traveling from my gaunt face down to my clothes hanging loose on my shrinking frame. The shock in her expression told me everything I'd been trying to ignore for months. She pushed past me into the living room, her suitcase forgotten on the porch. Dad, why is it so dark in here and cold? Her breath formed small clouds as she spoke, and I realized she was right. The house felt like a tomb. The thermostat? I mumbled, gesturing weakly toward the hallway. It's been acting up, but Sella was already moving toward the kitchen, her footsteps quick and determined. I heard the refrigerator door open, followed by a sharp intake of breath that made my stomach clench with shame. Dad. Her voice was hollow when she returned, holding up an empty milk carton and 3 packets of ketchup. Where is your food? I opened my mouth to give her the excuse I'd been practicing for months. Something about not being very hungry lately, about preferring lighter meals. But the words died in my throat when I saw the thermostat reading. She was staring at 52. Dad, where's your food? Your pension is $3,800 a month. Her voice rose with each word, a mixture of confusion and growing anger. That's when I heard the familiar click of heels on hardwood, and my heart sank. Arabella appeared in the kitchen doorway, perfectly dressed and wearing that smile I'd grown to fear. The smile that never reached her eyes. Is there a problem? She asked, her voice syrupy sweet as she looked from Sella to me, then back to Sella. Yes, there's a problem, Sella said, her voice steady, despite the fire in her eyes. Why is my father starving? Arabella leaned against the doorframe like she had all the time in the world. Well, someone has to manage that money responsibly. Your father would just waste it if we let him have access to it. Besides, she paused, that cold smile spreading wider. I control every single dollar he receives. The words hung in the air like poison. I watched my daughter's face go completely blank, and I'd seen that expression only once before when she was 12, and Tommy Richardson had pushed her little brother off the playground swing. She walked up to Tommy with that same empty palm and broken his nose. Slowly, deliberately, Sella reached up and removed her earrings, placing them carefully on the kitchen counter. The small action sent ice through my veins. She grabbed my arm, gently but firmly. Dad, we're going to the hospital right now. 20 minutes later, we were sitting in the emergency room at St. Mary's Hospital. The fluorescent lights felt harsh against my eyes as a nurse approached with her clipboard. What brings you in today? My father has severe weight loss and appears malnourished, Chella said steadily. I've been abroad for 3 years and just found him like this. The nurse's expression shifted as she studied my hollow cheeks and hanging clothes. How much weight has he lost? He used to weigh 165, maybe 120 now. Within minutes, I was on an examination table facing Dr. Augustus Kane, a man with kind eyes and a salt and pepper beard. When he placed me on the scale, the numbers glowed red. 118 lb. Sela gasped from the corner. When did you last weigh 165, he asked. Over a year ago. His examination was thorough but gentle. Blood pressure, heart rate, skin condition. His expression grew more serious with each test. We need comprehensive blood work and imaging, he said, quietly. 2 hours later, he returned with results that made Sella sink into her chair. Your father is suffering from severe malnutrition. His vitamin D is almost non-existent. B12 critically low. His protein levels show his body has been consuming muscle tissue to survive. He looked directly at Sella. This is prolonged nutritional deprivation. That's when Theodora Ashford knocked. The hospital social worker was a woman in her 50s, with steel gray hair and experienced eyes. I've reviewed your father's case. This fits the pattern of elder financial abuse and neglect. I'm required to document this and file with Adult Protective Services. She asked detailed questions while photographing my condition, each click preserving evidence of systematic neglect. The medical documentation is crucial, she explained to Sella. These records photographs test results. They paint a clear picture. The weight of it all pressed down on me. 47 lbs lost over more than a year. Critical vitamin deficiencies. My body eating itself to survive. The clinical terms made it real in a way I'd been avoiding. How long I whispered to Dr. Kane. At this rate of decline without intervention, maybe 6 months before organ failure. Sailor's hand found mine squeezing tight. 6 months. Arabella's timeline was becoming clear. We need to get you stabilized, Dr. Kane continued. IV fluids, vitamin injections, nutritional supplements, but this level of neglect. He shook his head. Someone was controlling your access to food. Theodora finished her documentation with practiced efficiency. I've seen cases like this before. The pattern is always the same. Isolation, financial control, gradual starvation. Your daughter arriving when she did likely saved your life. The fluorescent light suddenly felt less harsh, more like hope cutting through darkness. For the first time in months, people were listening. People were documenting. People were believing what I'd been too ashamed to say out loud. What happens now? S.A. asked. Now we build a case, Theodora replied. Medical evidence, financial records, witness statements. Everything we need to stop this from happening to anyone else. Dr. Kane handed Chella a thick folder of medical records. You'll need these, he said quietly, for the lawyers. The next morning, my daughter had already found attorney Lysander Gray. Lysander Gay's office smelled of leather and old books, the kind of place where serious conversations happen behind closed doors. Diplomas lined the mahogany-paneled walls, and afternoon sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, casting long shadows across his massive desk. Elder abuse cases are unfortunately common, he said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he reviewed the medical records Sella had spread before him. But this level of systematic neglect, he shook his head grimly. This is attempted murder. The words hit me like a physical blow. Murder. I'd been thinking of it as Arabella being difficult, maybe taking advantage, but hearing it named for what it truly was made something shift inside my chest. What we need now is financial documentation. Lysander continued opening a legal pad. Bank statements, pension records, any paperwork showing who has access to your accounts. Salah pulled out her laptop. I started gathering information this morning. Dad's pension goes directly to his checking account at Pacific Northwest Bank. Within an hour, we were sitting across from a bank manager named Patricia who pulled up my account history on her computer screen. The color drained from her face as she scrolled through the transactions. Mr. Sinclair, are you aware that $800 is withdrawn from your account every month to $800? I felt dizzy, but my pension is $3,800, yes, sir. Which leaves you with $1,000 monthly for all living expenses. Patricia's fingers clicked rapidly across her keyboard. This pattern goes back 36 months. S.A. leaned forward, her voice tight. Show us where that money went. The screen filled with transaction details. Nordstrom, $800. Neen Marcus, $1, $200. A travel agency charge for $4,500 labeled Bahamas Getaway. Restaurant charges at Portland's most expensive establishments, sometimes 3 or 4 times a week. $1,000, I whispered, staring at the screen. To live on rent, utilities, food, medication? Lander said, making notes. Impossible in today's economy, especially for someone with health issues. Patricia continued scrolling. There's also this. She pointed to a recurring monthly charge of $420 to Mutual Life Insurance Company. I don't have life insurance, I said. Someone does, Landry replied darkly. We spent 2 hours documenting everything, 36 months of systematic theft. luxury purchases while I rationed crackers, vacation packages while I wore 3 sweaters indoors. The mathematics were brutal. Approximately $100,000 stolen over 3 years. We need to set up a new account immediately, Lysander advised. One that only you control, Mr. Sinclair. We'll redirect a portion of your pension there while we build the case. At a different bank across town, I signed papers with shaking hands. For the first time in years, I would have access to my own money. The bank officer, a kind woman named Sarah Martinez, helped me set up online access. Your daughter can help you monitor this, she said gently. But only you have signature authority. As we left the bank, Sala's phone buzzed with a text from Lysander. Found something disturbing in the insurance records. Need forensic accountant ASAP. Back in his office, Lysander was pacing. This isn't just theft. It's a comprehensive financial abuse scheme. The insurance policy, the systematic draining of assets, the timing. He stopped pacing and looked directly at me. We need a forensic accountant, Lysander said, reaching for his phone. 3 days later, when Penelope Ravencraftoft called us back, her voice was trembling. Mr. Sinclair, Penelope said over the phone, you need to sit down for this. I was already sitting in Lysander's office, but something in her tone made me grip the armrests of my chair tighter. Sala moved closer, her face tense with anticipation. I have traced every transaction over the past 3 years. Penelope continued, her voice steady despite its earlier tremor. The luxury spending is extensive. A $4,000 Hermes handbag purchased last Christmas. A $12,000 vacation package to the Bahamas in March. Designer shoes, jewelry, spa treatments, all charged to accounts linked to your pension. Sailor's jaw clenched while my father was rationing crackers. It gets worse, Penelope said. I also performed computer forensics on your home system, Mr. Sinclair, with your permission, of course, as documented in the legal papers you signed. I nodded, though she couldn't see me through the phone. What did you find? Search histories, extensive ones, all traced to your daughter-in-law's user profile. There was a pause and I could hear papers rustling. The earliest searches date back 24 months, right after she married your son. My stomach dropped. What kind of searches? Average life expectancy, 72-year-old male. That was her first query. Then factors affecting elderly mortality rates. How long does malnutrition take to cause death? In seniors' organ inheritance laws, surviving spouse versus children. The room felt like it was spinning. Sailor's hand found mine squeezing so tight it almost hurt. There's more? Penelope continued relentlessly. Natural causes of death, elderly men. How to avoid suspicion. Elderly death. Inheritance distribution timeline. Oregon. Signs of starvation versus natural decline. Jesus Christ, Lysander whispered. The search frequency increased dramatically starting 6 months ago. Accelerating weight loss. Elderly. Vitamin deficiency death timeline. When to expect inheritance after elderly death. The most recent search was 3 days before your daughter's return. How long before body discovered elderly living alone I couldn't breathe? The office walls seemed to be closing in around me. Arabella hadn't just been stealing my money. She'd been researching how to kill me. She was planning this. Sala said, her voice hollow with shock. She was literally waiting for you to die. The pattern is clear, Penelope explained. Financial isolation first, then nutritional deprivation, while simultaneously researching inheritance laws and death timelines. This wasn't neglect, Mr. Sinclair. This was premeditated. Lysander was scribbling notes furiously. Can you document all of this? Screenshots, timestamps, everything already done. I've also cross-referenced the search dates with your bank withdrawals, Mr. Sinclair. The luxury purchases increased in direct correlation with the mortality research. The more she learned about killing you, the more of your money she spent. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. How long did she think it would take based on her research queries? She was expecting you to die within 6 to 8 months of reaching your current weight. Her searches about body discovery timelines suggest she was planning to claim she hadn't heard from you in several days when she eventually found you. The silence in the office was deafening. 3 people processing the reality that someone had been methodically planning my murder while living in my house, eating food bought with my money, smiling at family dinners. There's one more thing, Penelope said quietly. I found deleted emails between her and someone at Mutual Life Insurance discussing policy payouts and required waiting periods after death. The search history made my blood run cold. But what Lysander discovered the following week was even more terrifying. He called us into his office with an expression I'd never seen before. And I found something, Lysander said, sliding a document across his desk. And it changes everything. The paper felt heavy in my hands. Mutual Life Insurance Company? Term life insurance policy? My name is the insured party. Coverage amount $750,000. I don't have life insurance, I whispered. You do now, Lysander replied grimly. Someone took one out on you, S.A. read over my shoulder. Beneficiary Arabella Marie Sinclair, primary and sole. Her voice turned ice cold. When was this issued? 18 months ago. Look at the signature. He placed a magnifying glass over my supposed signature. Even I could see it was wrong. The letters were too angular, too practiced, but imperfect. Forgery, I said, hands shaking. Professional forgery, but forgery nonetheless. I've sent copies to a handwriting expert, Say was calculating in her head. 18 months ago. Dad, when did you start losing weight? I thought back to when food became scarce. Around then, maybe a little before. She took out life insurance and then started starving you, Sela said flatly. This was a murder plot. Lysander nodded. The timeline is damning. Policy issued September 2nd years ago. Your health decline began that winter. She was creating conditions for your death while ensuring she'd profit, $750,000. She'd been planning to collect it by killing me slowly. The monthly premium is $420. Lysander continued, automatically deducted from your account. She used your money to pay for the policy that would pay out when you died. How is that legal? Sala demanded. It's not. Insurance fraud, forgery, elder abuse, attempted murder, multiple felonies. I've contacted the district attorney and the insurance fraud division. The room felt surreal. Someone had forged my signature, stolen my money, researched my death, and bought insurance betting on my demise, all while living in my house, calling me Dad. There's more, Lander said quietly. Penelope found correspondence between Arabella and the insurance company about beneficiary claims. She was asking about required documentation, payout timelines, whether autopsy would be required for someone your age. She planned every detail, I said, feeling numb. Right down to funeral arrangements. We found searches for cremation costs, Oregon, and estate settlement timeline. She wasn't just waiting for you to die, Mr. Sinclair. She was orchestrating it. S.A. stood abruptly pacing to the window. When she turned back, her face showed the determination I remembered from her childhood. The same look when facing playground bullies. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial theft computer searches about my death, forged insurance documents, systematic starvation. Arabella hadn't just been stealing from me. She'd been methodically planning my murder while using my own money to fund both her lifestyle and the insurance policy that would make her rich when I died. The premium payments proved premeditation, Lander explained. Every month for 18 months, she paid $420 of your money, betting you'd die soon enough to make it profitable. I stared at the forged signature again. My name written in someone else's hand, signing away my life. We have everything we need. Chella said, her voice steady as steel. It's time to confront them. She arranged the meeting for the following Saturday morning at her apartment. Saturday morning arrived gray and cold. Sella had prepared everything carefully. Her dining table was covered with documents, medical records, bank statements, insurance policies, computer printouts. She'd arranged them like evidence in a courtroom, each piece of paper telling part of the story of my systematic destruction. "They'll be here in 10 minutes, she said, checking her watch. "Dad, are you ready for this?" I wasn't sure anyone could be ready to confront their own attempted murder, but I nodded anyway. My hands were steadier than they'd been in months. Having the truth documented, having people believe me had given me strength I'd forgotten I possessed. The knock came at exactly 10:00. Cella opened the door to reveal Tristan and Arabella, both dressed as if attending a business meeting rather than a family intervention. "What's this about?" Arabella demanded, sweeping into the apartment with her usual confidence. "Your dramatic phone call was rather vague." "Sit down," Cella said simply. Arabella remained standing, arms crossed. "I don't appreciate being summoned like sit down." Cella's voice carried an authority that made even Arabella comply. Tristan took the chair beside his wife, looking uncomfortable. "Sila, if this is about Dad's care, we can discuss." "This is about attempted murder," Cella interrupted. The words hung in the air like a physical presence. Arabella's face went pale, then flushed red with indignation. "That's ridiculous," she sputtered. "How dare you accuse S.A. placed the first document in front of them? Dad's medical records from last week, severe malnutrition, 47 lbs lost. The doctor said 6 more months and he'd be dead. That's not our fault if he won't eat properly." The bank statements came next. $100,000 stolen over 3 years. Designer handbags, luxury vacations, expensive restaurants, all while Dad was eating crackers and rice. Arabella's eyes darted between the papers, her confidence cracking. "I managed his money responsibly. This is your search history." Sala's voice was deadly calm as she displayed the computer printouts. "Average life expectancy, 72-year-old male." "How long does starvation take?" "Elderly organ inheritance loss." Tristan leaned forward, reading the searches. His face went ashen. "Arabella, what is this?" "It's manipulation," Arabella shot back. "She's twisting innocent research." And this Sala continued relentlessly. "Is a life insurance policy for $750,000 taken out on Dad's life 18 months ago with a forged signature? You're the sole beneficiary." The silence was deafening. Tristan stared at the insurance policy, his hands shaking, as he read his father's forged signature, his wife's name as beneficiary. "You were planning to kill him," he whispered. "That's insane." Arabella stood up abruptly. "You can't prove any of this means we can prove all of it," Sila said. "Forensic accountants, handwriting experts, computer specialists, medical professionals. We have 18 months of evidence showing systematic financial abuse, nutritional deprivation, and premeditated murder planning." Tristan looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. "Oh my God," he said slowly. "Oh my God, what have we done?" "We Capriu." Arabella turned on him. "You didn't know anything about." She stopped, realizing she'd just admitted guilt. "You have 24 hours, S.A. said quietly. "Confess to the district attorney, return the stolen money, and cooperate fully, or face criminal prosecution for attempted murder, insurance fraud, elder abuse, and financial exploitation." Arabella's mask finally slipped completely. "You little bitch," she snarled. "You think you can just waltz back here after 3 years and I'm saving my father's life," Sailor replied calmly. "Something you should have been doing." Arabella stormed toward the door, then turned back with venom in her eyes. "You'll never prove intent. You'll never make this stick. My lawyer will tear this apart. Your lawyer will advise you to take the plea deal," S.A. said, "because attempted murder carries 25 to life in Oregon." Arabella stormed out, screaming threats about lawyers. 6 months later, I sat in the Multnomah County Courthouse, watching my daughter-in-law face the consequences of her actions. The courtroom was smaller than I had expected, but the weight of justice felt enormous. Oak-paneled walls rose toward a high ceiling, and morning light filtered through tall windows, casting long shadows across the gallery. I sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, Sala beside me, both of us watching as Arabella entered with her defense attorney. She looked different, thinner, paler, her usual designer clothes replaced by a simple gray suit. Her lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Peterson, whispered urgently in her ear as they took their seats at the defendant's table. The people versus Arabella. Marie Sinclair. The bailiff announced as Judge Patricia Hendricks entered. She was a woman in her 60s with silver hair and eyes that had seen every kind of human cruelty. District Attorney Mike Turner rose for his opening statement. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about greed manipulation and attempted murder. The defendant systematically starved an elderly man while stealing his money and forging insurance documents, all while researching how long it would take him to die. The evidence presentation took 2 days. Medical records showing my 47 lb weight loss. Bank statements documenting the $100,000 in theft. Computer forensics displaying Arabella's searches about elderly mortality rates and inheritance loss. Dr. Augustus Kane testified about my condition when Sella brought me to the hospital. In 30 years of practice, I've rarely seen such severe malnutrition in someone with adequate financial resources. This was systematic deprivation. Penelope Ravencroft walked the jury through the financial analysis showing luxury purchases made with my pension money while I was rationing food. The defendant spent $4,000 on a single handbag while Mr. Sinclair was eating crackers for dinner. But the most devastating testimony came from my own son. Tristan took the witness stand looking like he'd aged years and months. His voice cracked as he spoke. I saw my father getting thinner, saw the house getting colder, saw the empty refrigerator. My wife told me he was just being stubborn, refusing to eat properly. I wanted to believe her because believing her was easier than facing what was really happening. Did you know about the insurance policy? The prosecutor asked. No, I found out the same day as everyone else. When I saw my father's forged signature when I realized my wife had been planning his death, he broke down completely. I failed him. I failed my own father. Arabella's defense tried to paint her as a concerned daughter-in-law, overwhelmed by caregiving responsibilities. They claimed the searches were innocent research. The financial management was necessary. The insurance policy was for my protection. Judge Hendricks wasn't buying it. Mr. Peterson. She said during closing arguments, your client researched how long starvation takes to kill an elderly person while systematically denying the person food. She forged insurance documents worth $750,000 million while spending his money on luxury items. This constitutes attempted murder through systematic neglect. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. Guilty on all counts, the foreman announced. Elder abuse, financial exploitation, insurance fraud, and attempted murder. Judge Hendricks showed no mercy during sentencing. Mr. Sinclair trusted you with his care, and you betrayed that trust in the most heinous way possible. 8 years in state prison, $750,000 in restitution. This sentence cannot be reduced or suspended. Arabella finally broke down as the bailiff approached with handcuffs. Please, she sobbed. I never meant for it to go this far. I just needed the money. Please, you researched my death timeline, I said, quietly speaking to her for the first time since the confrontation. You calculated how long I'd live. You were waiting for me to die. As I watched Arabella being led away in handcuffs, I expected to feel satisfaction. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Guilt. In the months that followed, this feeling only grew stronger. The guilt was eating at me. Everyone said I should feel vindicated, but something felt wrong. Daduan Sala kept telling me as we sat in her living room where I'd been staying since the trial. Arabella got what she deserved. Justice was served. But justice didn't explain why I woke up every morning with a knot in my stomach. It didn't explain why watching her led away in handcuffs had felt less like victory and more like recognition. I'd gained back 20 lb since moving in with Sela. My cheeks had color again. My clothes fit properly. By all measures, I should have been grateful, relieved, ready to move forward. Instead, I found myself staring out windows for hours, lost in thoughts I couldn't quite grasp. You're processing trauma, the therapist Sela had found explained during one of our sessions. What happened to you was severe abuse. These feelings are normal, but they didn't feel normal. They felt familiar. The déjà vu started small. Walking past Sala's kitchen, I'd suddenly smell coffee and hear voices from another time. Watching her pay bills at her dining table, I'd see different hands, different papers, different faces. The present kept bleeding into memories I couldn't quite access. One evening, Sala was showing me photos on her laptop pictures from her time in Europe, trying to fill in the 3 years we'd lost. A photo of her in a cafe in Prague made me freeze. "You look like your Aunt Margaret in that one," I said without thinking. S.A. looked confused. "Dad, I don't have an Aunt Margaret." The words had come from somewhere deep, automatic, and certain. But she was right. My sister had been named Patricia, not Margaret. Patricia had died in a car accident when S.A. was 10. So who was Margaret? The fragments started coming more frequently after that. Sitting in Sala's garden, I'd suddenly remember a different garden, different flowers, a woman's voice calling, holding dinners ready. But it wasn't my wife's voice. It wasn't anyone I could place. During a grocery trip with S.A., I found myself in the cereal aisle, staring at boxes of cornflakes, overwhelmed by a memory of someone else's hands, someone else's cart, someone else's desperate calculations about making food last until the next pension check. Dad. Salah's voice seemed to come from far away. "Are you okay? I wasn't okay." The memories were getting stronger, more vivid, more disturbing. I remembered being 42 years old, standing in a kitchen that wasn't mine, arguing with a woman about money. I remembered feeling frustrated, overwhelmed, justified in my anger. But the details were wrong. In these memories, I wasn't the victim. I wasn't the one being starved, being controlled, being systematically destroyed. In these memories, I need to go home. I told Sela that night, "You are home, Dad. You're staying here with me." No, I said the words coming from a place I didn't understand. "I need to go to Sunset Manor." Sailor looked stricken. "Dad, that's a nursing home. You don't need?" "I live there," I said quietly. The certainty settling over me like a shroud. I've always lived there. The memories became clearer each day until finally, sitting alone in my room at Sunset Manor Care Facility, I remembered the horrible truth about who I really am. I need to tell you the truth. I'm not living with Sela. I haven't seen my daughter in 3 years. I'm sitting in room 247 at Sunset Manor Care Facility in Portland, Oregon. I've been here 18 months. Through my window, I see visitors coming to see their elderly relatives. No one visits me. Sala never existed. My daughter's name was Margaret, and she died in a car accident 35 years ago at 22. She never went to Europe. She never saved anyone. The story I told you about the loving daughter rescuing her father. That was the story I wished had happened. That was my guilt creating a fantasy to cope with what I actually did. 30 years ago, I was the son. I was Tristan. My father Harold was 72 when my wife Linda and I moved in to care for him. He received $800 monthly. Linda convinced me he was becoming senile, couldn't manage finances, needed our help. We controlled every dollar. We took his car keys. We isolated him from friends. We fed him scraps while we ate well. We kept the house cold to save money we spent on ourselves. I watched my father waste away from 165 to 18. I watched him wear 3 sweaters indoors because we wouldn't pay for heat. I watched him ration crackers while Linda bought expensive clothes with his money. When my sister Margaret came home from college and tried to intervene, I sided with my wife. I told Margaret she was being dramatic. I said Dad was fine, just aging. I chose my wife's lies over my father's life because believing lies was easier. Margaret died 3 months later driving home from a lawyer's office where she'd been seeking help for Dad. She never got the chance to save him. My father died 6 months after that. Officially pneumonia, but really from systematic neglect, from starvation, from a broken heart. Linda inherited everything through a forged will. We moved to California with his money and never spoke of him again. Now, 30 years later, my son David does to me exactly what I did to my father. He controls my pension. He keeps me isolated here. He visits monthly to sign papers and collect checks. His wife Jessica researches life insurance and inheritance laws just like Linda did. The cycle continues. I told you this story because I see it everywhere. Adult children who convince themselves they're helping while stealing. Spouses who justify abuse as management. Families who choose convenience over conscience. I was never the victim. I was the perpetrator. The guilt I felt watching Arabella go to prison wasn't sympathy. It was recognition. I saw myself in her because I had been her. What goes around comes around. I'm telling this story not for sympathy, but as a warning. The cycle of abuse continues until someone chooses to break it. My father's dead. My sister's dead. My son learned from my example. I am exactly where I deserve to be. But maybe if you're listening to this, you can choose differently. You can be the one who breaks the cycle. You can choose love over greed, truth, over convenience, protection, over profit. It's never too late to ask for forgiveness and change, but it's also never too early to choose what's right. I've carried this burden for 30 years, and God knows I deserve every sleepless night. This true story isn't one of those heartwarming grandpa stories you usually hear. It's a confession, a warning, and hopefully a wake-up call. Don't be like me. Don't choose greed over love. Don't let pride blind you to the suffering you're causing. When God places elderly parents in your care, it's a sacred trust, not an opportunity for profit. I violated that trust, and I've spent 3 decades paying the price. The lesson from my life is simple, but brutal. What you do to others will be done to you. The abuse I inflicted on my father came back to me through my own son. God's justice is perfect, even when it takes 30 years to arrive. But here's what I want you to understand from this true story. You still have a choice. Unlike the fictional grandpa stories that end with happy reunions, real life gives you chances to change course before it's too late. Choose compassion over convenience. Choose your parents' dignity over your financial gain. If my story sounds familiar, if you recognize yourself in my words, there's still time. God forgives, families can heal, and cycles can be broken, but only if you act now, while your parents are still alive, to receive your love instead of your neglect. If this story moved you or made you think about your own family relationships, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like and subscribe to our channel for more real stories that matter. Tell me in the comments, what would you do differently after hearing this? Did you enjoy my story? What a journey it has been. I truly wonder, what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have chosen silence to keep the peace? Or would you have done what I did to reclaim your dignity? Let's meet in the comments below. I'm so curious to hear your thoughts. I'm reading every single one. Which city are you listening from tonight? If my story resonated with you, you can support me and help me bring more stories like this to the world by sending a super thanks. Your sweet support means the world to me and allows me to continue this journey with all of you. On the screen now, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend you watch next. There are so many more on my channel, each with its own lessons and triumphs. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Thank you for being here with me. Until the next story, with love and respect.